Our next panel, featuring champions of innovation, will focus on how private sector leaders view the future of advanced tech and national security. Join me in welcoming Dr. Stephen Walker, Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Lockheed Martin, Zach Kramer, Microsoft's Corporate Vice President for Strategic Missions and Technologies, Lee Palmer, Vice President for Google's Public Sector, and Dr. Anshu Roy, Founder and CEO of Rhombus Power. They are joined by Will Carter, an expert on AI, cyber, and emerging tech.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. And I also want to take time to thank Ely, Ilbert, the whole SCSP team for organizing such a wonderful event and for bringing us all here today. And also for the opportunity to share the stage with this fantastic panel of experts. As we've heard a lot over the last 2 days, there really is a sea change in the way that we innovate in the United States and the important role that the private sector plays in that innovation and the importance of really strengthening the relationship between the private sector and the government has been really center stage throughout these conversations. And so we're really fortunate to have 4 fantastic experts representing those private sector perspectives in a variety of different ways to tell us more about their thoughts and to share some of the innovation that's happening within their companies. And so that's actually where I want to start. Let's start with the technology and the work that you guys are actually doing. And maybe I'll start from the end with Zach. Tell us a little bit about some of the work that your company is doing for the government, for national security, that some of the folks in this room probably aren't aware of.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and thank you everyone for attending. There's several things as we look across the spectrum of what Microsoft is doing. First and foremost is just how we bring our commercial technology to the national security space. But then as we look at innovations and things that we've done within that, there are things like our premonition work, which is how we take AI models and apply them to genomics trends to find new and emergent viruses and other things. As we learned from the pandemic, where we find these viruses and capabilities is important to national security and how we do that work. Also looking at how we provide capabilities from, whether it's capabilities coming down from space and AI innovation up doing image analytics up in the sky, to how we bring those insights down to Earth faster. So lots of innovation happening across applying AI in unique spaces, well beyond just what you may see with some of the open AI and work that we've done.
Lee?
All right. So I know, Will, you said to pick one, but I'm going to go rapid fire and I'm going to say 4 because I can't pick one. First of all, Google is on the stage and I'm super thrilled to be here and I'm super happy to bring the magic of Google to the US government. So that's 1. 2, we took a fundamentally different approach in how we're going after certifications, and we certified our commercial cloud. And why is that important? As we look at AI and we look at the next, the future fight, it's going to be important to have global scale and global processing power. So that's number 2. Number 3 is how we approach our sovereign cloud. And we're really focused on bringing AI to the edge and putting it in the mission's hands where they need it. And number 4 is our the largest privately owned network in the world, where 25% of the internet's traffic traverses through Google's network.
Andrew.
Thank you, Will. So our work is really called Rhombus Guardian within the U.S. government. We have a platform for what I call problem solving, artificial intelligence being one of the tools that we use for that as applicable. But we are obsessed with the idea of changing the way national security decisions get made at scope and scale. On the one side, we work with the Pentagon on resourcing decisions, because I like to say all kill chains start with the money, and how to build a smarter budget where we can understand the consequences of the second and higher order consequences of each of those investment actions that they contemplate across the billions of dollars that get spent. To my utter surprise, when I first learned of this problem in 2018 via DIU, for which I have Secretary Carter to thank for, and I personally did get a chance to say that to him, actually. When I found out about this, my question was, how do you build your budgets if you don't understand the consequences of your investments? And well the way it has been built before. So that's one side of what we do. The second side of what we do is really about warfighting and supporting the warfighter through better predictions of threats, looming threats and imminent threats across the world, where we use both open source and classified sources to provide far better predictions on what might happen next, much further left of those events. So that's sort of in a nutshell of what we do for the U.S. government.
Yeah, well, thank you. Most people think of Lockheed Martin as platforms, airplanes, satellites, ground vehicles, et cetera. And we do, I think we make the best platforms in the world for defense. But about 4 years ago, we realized, the world was changing a lot. And so we stood up what we call 21st Century Security, which is focused on getting better at all the digital technologies that are going to be important to the future fight. And if you're going to have things like CJED, C2, and other things like that, you're going to need the comms, resilient comms, you're going to need the BMC2, the effectors, both kinetic and non-kinetic, and the sensing that goes with it all. So we started investing in technologies like that. And one of the things I'm most proud of is about 4 years ago, we stood up the Lockheed Martin AI Center at corporate. We have 4 business areas, and our belief was that we needed one AI center that could develop the technologies required to apply AI, the best AI in the world, to our platforms. And so we did that, and have had some great success in building what we call an AI factory, which is all the machine learning ops that you need to produce capability quickly in the AI and machine learning world. It's, when I was in government, I used to call it the, making AI an engineering discipline. I view ML ops as doing that. And, a recent success, and the reason I wanted to talk about this example is it's AI, people talk about AI being the future. It is today. And we've applied it thanks to the Navy and their desire to apply it to the Red Sea issue that's going on right now with the Houthi threat. How do we ensure that our Navy ships out in the Red Sea can really discriminate what's coming at them better than maybe they could have yesterday? And so we've been working our ML ops capability with the Navy hand in hand, and we've produced software updates for the Aegis Combat System. What used to take months now takes less than 10 hours. And we can turn that AI update around in less than 10 hours and actually get it out to the field real time. And so that's something Lockheed couldn't do 4 years ago, I'm pretty sure. And we can do it today. And so I'm proud of that. I think it's an example of a defense prime working with the best in the commercial sector to make something like that happen for a warfighter today.
Fantastic. And I want to pick up on that thread a little bit, because I think as much as we've spoken so much over the last few days about how the relationship between the private sector and government has changed, I also think it's important that we acknowledge how the private sector itself has changed. So you touched a little bit on this, but how do you respond when someone says, the established primes and the established companies can't drive innovation in this space, can't bring new technology into the government? How has Lockheed Martin viewed that and tackled that challenge? And what do you see as the next trends going forward?
We very much, and all the way from the CEO on down, very much agree with what General Rainey said. Actually, he said it yesterday and he said it today. We need to think about an American industrial base, not a defense industrial base. And so we are very focused on working with commercial companies who are investing a lot more money than we are in certain technologies like AI and machine learning, working with them to be that bridge into the Defense Department, especially for companies that don't have large infrastructure to work with the Pentagon, the 5-sided box, and be that bridge for them. And so an example, working with one of the bigger companies is Microsoft. We're working with them on their cloud activities right now, and we've announced that trying to bring their secure cloud capability into the Department of Defense world, and having great success in with some of our most classified programs in doing that. So to change defense and to make it more agile, flexible, open to new technologies, I think it's going to take everybody. It's going to take a defense prime who knows the business and knows the application. It's also going to take folks like I have here with me on the stage who are in many of those technology areas leading the effort.
So, Anshu, you're coming at this in some ways from the opposite end of the spectrum, the small, agile, new entrant into the space. I think you guys have 170 employees. How do you see the sector continuing to evolve? How do you see companies like yours fitting into the broader private sector ecosystem supporting our national security? And what do you see as the biggest opportunities for companies like yours?
So Will, indeed, I come from the other side of the spectrum. And my view is that this, Washington and the DoD have a certain conventional view of what the ecosystem looks like. And as Steve was saying, that is going to change over time. What companies like Rhombus absolutely don't like is being put in a box, right? Nobody likes to be put in a box. But for categorization purposes, for investment purposes, for funding purposes, whatever it might be, those categories get created and they become very convenient, and they end up defining the identity of the company for many years to come in this part of the world. Well, that's not Silicon Valley, right? So my sense is that the whole notion of the ecosystem is changing, and with organizations like DIU and several others, but DIU being the lead, especially under Doug Beck's leadership, I think many more like me will come. And there are many who want to come, I know. And we are ourselves trying to enable companies, both large and small, to get into spaces that they never used to be. And therefore, it's not that large companies can't innovate. It's just that they are stuck in an innovator's dilemma. And you're making money in something, then why touch it, right? Why disrupt it? So to the extent that they have some risk appetite, they can take risks with us and benefit in the longer run. So you asked me how I see things changing. I think I see those activities already beginning to happen. The rest, my friend, is quite uncertain.
All right. So Lee, as a former Googler, I know how much Google hates being put into 4 or 5-sided boxes as well.
Or it was hard.
But Google is an interesting player in this conversation because internally there's still very much a culture of that garage innovation. I know as a recent former Googler, I know a number of engineers that literally still work in their garages, to maintain that energy. But in many ways, Google has become one of the big guys, the established players. Has that changed at all, how you think about how Google can work with the federal government? And what would you say are some lessons learned from Google's experience expanding its partnerships with government?
So one of the reasons why I'm personally so excited about answering this question is that I'm relatively new to big tech. I spent 30 years in the defense industrial base before coming to big tech. And I honestly believe the magic is between the two. It takes the ecosystem, you need it all, right? So one of the reasons that I mentioned the things that Google's working on, right? Commercial cloud, sovereign cloud, network, is because it's fundamentally what we need for our future conflict. And the panelist here before was talking about it's a big data, it's an AI driven world. And I'm super excited to be at Google because I can't think of a better place to come get this capability in the government's hands. So you asked, what do we need in order to be able to do that? In addition to the partnerships with the ecosystem, I firmly believe that the tech companies have to keep pushing those boundaries. I see our customers are having conversations and urgency like they've never had before. They want to change, and we need to keep helping pushing the boundaries, right? In the same token, we have to meet them where they are. It's hard to change an enterprise like the Department of Defense, right? So you can't just come in and say, I have this great idea, I need to be here. We have to take them along that journey and meet them where they are. And when policy shifts are required, and I don't think anybody on this stage or in the audience would disagree that policy shifts are required, we have to back it up with data. We can't just say because we think or because we said so. We have to back it up with data. And then I think the last thing that that integrators know really well is we have to have some patience, right? I mean, you were at Google. It's not always a patient culture, and we have to have some patience, right? Because things don't turn on a dime.
For sure. And Zach, I'm curious, your perspective on this. Being at Microsoft is a company that has ridden multiple waves of transformation within the technology industry and really reinvented itself in order to continue to meet the needs of its customers over a long period of time. What do you see as the next wave that Microsoft is preparing for, particularly in how they support the U.S. government and partner with folks to do that?
I don't know if anybody here has heard of the AI stuff that is happening. So I think, as we look at the transformation for us, we first and foremost think of ourselves as a platform for enabling others. And so one of the things that Dr. Walker hit on is our partnership with Lockheed about how do we think about differently about what enterprise capability looks like at the secret and top secret level. So we've invested very heavily in how we build out these platforms and clouds to be able to bring our full suite of enterprise capabilities to meet those needs and say the work that we've done to transition enterprises on the commercial side applies equally to how we transition both the government and the private sector people that are supporting it. I think another transition for us has been the fact that we are part of the industrial base now. Before, we used to sell software that you would install, one of the waves that we rode. But now we are providing platforms and capabilities to execute on, and that both enables transformation for big companies, but also enables smaller entrants to have lower cost of, lower amounts of investment to be able to drive innovation. And I think AI, as we see that wave coming, is just further in that. This requires massive amounts of capital investment to be able to deliver these things. And being able to have a company like Microsoft able to make those investments that are needed to support the US government and broader commercial innovation, and then deliver those platforms and capabilities for innovation by both small and large partners, and then working together with Google and others as we look at how do we deliver cybersecurity together, how do we do these things that now protect those innovations, that wave of capability is there and incredibly important. And then how that enables the people to do more. So I'm sure, Steve can tell you a lot about how hard it is to get enough talent to do the things that you need. So how do you make them more effective and capable, whether it's with co-pilots and things like that based into daily productivity, or things like the GitHub Copilot that see accelerating developer productivity? And then how do we make sure that those are all available in the places that are needed to get the job done so that we can deliver together more capability to the government faster to meet the challenges that we need and the competition that we have?
Absolutely. And, we're talking about what the private sector is doing and what is changing. But Lee, in your answer, you mentioned, what the government needs to do and where policy can go. And for those in the audience, this is when you should be taking notes while we're getting the list of demands from our panelists. But I'm curious your thoughts, not just on what the government needs to do and what those policy changes are that we need to see, but also what is government doing right? And what do we need to make sure we keep doing?
Yeah. So I mentioned before, there really is a leaning in and a partnership and a willingness to break some glass, if you will, or break some china and think about the world a different way. So I see urgency and willingness to approach problems in a different way, which is really exciting. I'd say, a couple things that I really were leaning in on is first and foremost, like a commitment to modernization, right? There's a recognition that lift and shift is just not going to work, right? There's the famous story of, if you want to build a better if you want to have a car that has better gas mileage, you tweak, you turn the car off at the stoplight. If you want to have a car that doesn't use gas at all, you've got to fundamentally redesign the car. And it's the same thing for information technology and for modernization. You've got to fundamentally think about how you approach these problems differently. And security has to be at the core of everything you do. When we start talking about a data analytics world, about an AI-driven world, everything is about security at its foundation. And every conversation starts and ends with, what are we doing to secure the platform? What are we doing to make sure we're secure? What are we doing to make sure that we are keeping our national edge?
So, Zach, kind of building off of that, you talked about platforms and the important role that they play in the way that Microsoft is thinking about this new wave of technology. Building on what Lee was talking about, how can government best leverage the work that you're doing? How can they use these platforms to really transform themselves And what are those policies that are working and that are not working that they need to focus on?
Yeah, I think the good that we've seen really is how we build a culture of experimentation, and we really should build on that and make sure that experimentation is not just contained to innovation units or other things like that, but how we're broadly getting this in the hands of the people at the front lines. What we've all seen when we go work and design and build new products, that the people at the end of the road are the ones that know what need to happen. So how do you build that culture of innovation across the board and make things accessible? I think the challenges then come in, and Lee has hit on some of this, is how we enable that innovation to then quickly get in the hands of people who can use it. And what we've often seen is someone can come up with something quick, they can develop something, and then it gets bogged down, whether it's in approval processes or people unwilling to take risks on how we drive that transformation. And so being willing to take risks and setting up structures that encourage people to take risks. Right now, fundamentally, there is no upside in most scenarios for taking the risks that we need people to take to drive that innovation in places. I think the other one that is a challenge for all of us as we invest in new technologies and to bring the power of cloud to where government is needed is how we have consistent understanding of what usage of those investments will be. When a company like Microsoft or Google or others invests in the commercial marketplace, right, we have a broad set of customers that we can compete over. When you narrow the set of customers down, it becomes challenging to understand how do we bring some of these very expensive investments that we've made and in a way that gives us predictability. So there's funding and procurement and those things that are certainly problem areas for us to explore and work together on.
So Anshu, coming at this as a small company and also, given your experience with DIU, what do you think are the things that the government has done recently to innovate in this space and the way that they engage with technology that have been really effective? And are there key things at the top of your mind that, for example, would make it easier for Rhombus to support the national security mission?
Yeah. So in addition to contracting, which is the whole OTA process, which has been a breakthrough, clearly, there is I'd say there are probably two other areas where things are working, kind of, and they can be done better. The first is putting smaller companies that are leaner, faster onto programs of record at some risk, right? You can always kill a program. It's such a big deal. So, right? So what's the downside? I don't get it, right? So go for it. That's one. Second is all the amazing stuff that Google and Microsoft do. In the end, the bottleneck tends to be the ATO process. And having lived it personally through Rhombus, I think that it needs further improvement and acceleration, more streamlining, less bureaucracy, more automation, all of which Google does seem like effortlessly now, right? And so I think those practices can be learned, and I'm sure Microsoft does the same on their cloud. So those would be my suggestions.
I love that you use the term effortless. And I know and I'm sure Lee worked very hard at Google.
To make it seem effortless.
Not exact optics. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I do want to just pull out one thing. You mentioned OTAs, other transaction authorities, which I think is an important part of this. One of the things that I've kind of thought about a lot over the last few years is we just need to get the O out of OTAs. Why is this the other way? This is a really good, powerful tool to bring new capabilities into the government. And I think we need to move it away from that other space, that fringe space, and really turn it into a core way of acquiring technology. But obviously, Dr. Walker, other than continuing to give billions of dollars to Lockheed Martin, how can the government, continue to build on their past success? And also, I think it's particularly interesting to hear from the perspective of a company that has very successfully worked with the government over multiple generations of policy. Where do you see the opportunities to streamline things?
Sure, and I'm just going to follow on what Anshu said about ATO's authority to operate. I was spoiled when I was at DARPA and on the government side. I didn't realize how hard industry has it in terms of the security environment that industry has to work in. I had SAP, TSSCI, everything in my one office at DARPA, and I could
easily see it all. And that's not the case in industry. Everything is very compartmentalized by program, by agency. ATOs take a long time. Boy, if government could just appreciate those hurdles and help us do better there, we could do so much more from an industry standpoint. And every government person I talk to now, I tell them that. I think SEP reform, which the DepSecDef has been pushing, is excellent and is the right way to go. I think it's been said that China doesn't operate as much in this compartmentalized methodology compared to ourselves, and so if we want to go faster, if we want to be able to help the government solve its problems at a faster rate, that would be one thing to help us fix. And we got lots of brain power here on the industry side, on the government side. We could fix that if we really put some brain cells on it and focus on it. I think one of the things the government's doing great at is the CHIPS Act. I really support having a more resilient supply chain. We have the greatest software companies, I think, in the world, but hardware is going to be important for things like AI and machine learning, et cetera. So we, that is something the government we highly support. We want to make sure that money and those resources are used also for national security. And so having the Defense Department engaged in that is going to be important.
Absolutely. And, we talk about all of this and the private sector selling into the government, but, something that you mentioned earlier, Zach, about how do we make technology fit to purpose for government, and how do we fit it to their needs? I think one of the really interesting questions for the national security community in particular is, when my phone runs out of battery and I am operating in a denied environment, my life essentially grinds to a halt. But I think that for the national security community, for our troops on the front lines, from the warfighter's perspective, that has to be your baseline assumption. And so as a company that is offering so many of these services in the cloud, at where connectivity is core to the offerings, how do you think about meeting the needs of warfighters in denied environments?
Who are you addressing that to?
I was starting with Zach, but I'm
right.
you too.
Go ahead, Sid. I can't wait to answer
Okay.
this question.
I think there's two elements to it that we've thought a lot about. And so one is just how do you reduce the environments where there is a lack of connectivity? And I think companies with broad global networks and other things like that, and introducing the ability to use commercial transport and other things gives you opportunities to first reduce those scopes. Partnerships like ours with SpaceX and Starlink then open up another set of opportunities on how do you optimize transport back to the cloud and make sure that you're landing in those. But that still doesn't cover all the scenarios. So we have both from our edge technologies that are used commercially, whether it's in manufacturing or other places that can't tolerate going down. And even then on top of that, how do you take some of those models, those large language models from an AI perspective and bring them down to the edge? We recently announced our Phi models and those things that will come down for both large language and other things. And so we've been looking at how you have edge computing, but it's challenging. And so this is where we've partnered, with Lockheed and with others on how do you begin thinking about what those segments are and the right amount of software to put in there? Because the challenge really isn't how do I deliver you a platform or a capability at the edge? I can do that. But how do you shrink down the breadth of what you're trying to do into something that can operate autonomously? What are the right systems that you need in place to be able to launch an aircraft or launch a plane? I can give you something that hosts Kubernetes and that does the work there. But if you don't have the software paradigm and the principles and the ability to break things up into the right segment that operates better when the cloud is there, and we've seen this with some of the systems we've worked on, where when we started the process, they said everything has to operate disconnected. And then they realized how limiting that was to just have an edge platform without a cloud. What they've now said is I need something that can bootstrap from a cloud, operate edge, and operate autonomously so that I can do the key aspects that I need, but I still get the benefit of big data. I still get the benefit of those large processing as I'm looking at rafts of telemetry and doing the broad mission planning that I need, but I can still get an aircraft off the flight line whenever I need to, regardless of that connectivity. So it's a balance that has to have the best of both cloud and edge, because we found edge only is, can be limiting in what you have to do.
They're making it easy for you, clearly. Lee, you wanted to jump in as well.
Yeah. So I love this problem and this question. I mentioned 30 years in the system integrator community, and we were always looking at edge problems when you're looking at special forces or whatever you're looking at, and you can't build something centrally and then deploy it at the edge. It's very difficult, right? So one of the benefits of being, second or third to market, right, from a Google perspective, is we took a fundamentally different approach in how we're going after our sovereign cloud or our classified cloud or edge cloud or whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to call it. Instead of taking a cloud and trying to shrink it to the edge, we built a new cloud from the ground up with the edge in mind. So it can run on as little as 3 racks. Why is that important? Because it can run in your data center, it can run in my data center, I can scale it to be an enterprise cloud, I can put it in a denied area, it can be operated by a partner, it can be operated by a customer, it can be operated by Google, right? So it gives us some flexibility because we took the time to think about the edge first and build it from the ground up. And then when I was talking about AI tools at the edge, fundamentally, Google is a data and an AI tool and an AI company. So the reason that we did that is so that we can put that big data processing and that AI processing as close to the warfighter as possible.
So Anshu, your company, you mentioned that you guys are involved with logistics, also with enabling smart decision-making, intel analysis. In many ways, it picks up on a thread that Zach and Lee have talked about how do you let enough of the action happen at the edge, but make sure that you're getting all the information and awareness back to central points where larger decisions need to be made. How do you think about that and how DoD can best capitalize on that dynamic?
Yeah, so there are 2 parts to it in my head. So the first, let's explore some scenarios, right? So if you think about, you have both the cloud and the edge, then there are certain solutions that are valid. Cloud gone, only edge. Now you have to think about microclouds and things like that, which is great. But there's also a data architecture piece, which is, I think, it's too much of superfluous, unnecessary data being pushed around, which is really not necessary for targeting. It's really not necessary for many of the actions on the battlefield. And I think slicing that and architecting it in ways that are smarter is really a key to the puzzle here. And then I think if your edge is gone and your cloud is gone, then having something that provides you the latest picture of how things were, and you can carry around, it's out in your hand, and there's no mothership to call back to, but it can tell you the latest predictions of where the enemy was and so on. And we built systems like that back in 2017 and 18. That, I think, would be incredibly valuable. So that's one side. The second side to this is, if you look at the revolution of AI, there is, it comes at a cost, many costs. But one cost is the quality of code that gets written today. A lot of it is just integrated from open source. And thoughtful engineering of software is no longer done. I think we can all agree with that. And so that takes time, right? And so, well, who's got the time? So the point I'm trying to make is that I think we need to enforce, probably from the private sector, more discipline on the quality of outputs we produce, quality of code we produce, the quality and the thoughtfulness behind data architectures and for use cases that you guys have been talking about. That would be incredibly valuable.
So I know we're low on time, but I do want to hear from you on this. And, I'm tempted to ask, so how many racks will you be putting in the F-35? But,
we have
as someone who's building, the edge physically, how do you think about this?
Yeah, well, we're focused on the edge, obviously, because we're building a lot of those nodes, right? And we have to be resilient, but we also know that it's going to be possible to be resilient 100% of the time. So we're going to have to do the compute, do the sensing, the compute, take the action, probably cut off from at times the central node. And so one of the things, just kind of dipping our toe in the water on this, of course, we have a lot of R&D programs focused on edge processing and better swap, et cetera. But we worked with IBM and Red Hat, and we've announced this partnership to look at could we build basically a cloud at the edge on a very small UAV Stalker platform that we build, and be able to send Stalkers up, have this AI and machine learning capability on the Stalker itself, sense the environment, make an update in real time based on that sensed environment. And if one UAV was taken out, how would that other UAV respond and complete the mission without the full complement of edge devices? And we've been able to do that and demonstrate that with IBM Red Hat. Now, the key there was they had the idea for an edge device like this, and other companies make these devices as well. But they had no idea how small it had to be, the type of computing power we needed. And so we gave them the military application and said, we want these Stalkers to be able to do this. And they were able to help us do that. And so that, I think, is where this whole thing is headed. And the right balance of cloud centrally versus on the edge. That's what Siege JADC2 is all about, trying to figure that out. We're not completely there yet, but it's going to be some combination. But we're very focused on how do you have cloud computing to do the AI and machine learning you need to do at the edge without a central location.
So we're getting to the end of our time, but I think I always like to end a conversation by looking around the corner. So for those in the audience who might be wondering when you're going to be releasing Chat POTUS or Hey Google, fire the missiles, what do you see if you had just one, and we got to keep it brief, but if you could say just one technology or application that you see coming down the pike that the national security community should be thinking about and trying to get ahead of, what would that be? What's something that gets you really excited?
I have to say the thing that we've been working on to the point of code has been some of the things that we're doing around GitHub and the productivity that we can bring to developers and into security. The advances that we're seeing in those early areas are just amazing and transformational and can make much more productivity for us to be able to answer those challenges. I just kind of come back to that point, and I am intrigued in what the next 5 years are going to look as these technologies get in the hand of everyone.
Great.
I agree completely. It's AI. It's all AI all the time, whether it's language translation or generative AI. I mean, that is where we're going. And, I agree with my colleague from Microsoft. Right? I mean, that there's so much potential.
All right, Dr. Walker, I'm going to let Anshu have the last.
All right. Okay. Well, I think General Milley said it best yesterday. He talked about the applications of AI and machine learning potentially, and the real application, I think, is bringing that capability into helping the decision maker make decisions faster. And I think this whole large language model development that we've seen in the last couple of years can really help us do that. And we've used some open source models at Lockheed to just kind of understand how you would use that to help the decision maker understand the battle space better and be able to make decisions faster. And I think that's going to enable us to do a lot of things where we don't necessarily have that ability to do today.
So Anshu, last word. What is the next product coming out from Rhombus?
Over what time horizon?
Kidding.
1 month? Okay. No, but if you look at the next 5 years, I would say, I want to tell you all about our next product, by the way, but that's maybe later. What I see happening is, given the compute limitations within the DoD in the next, and things work sort of slowly, medium to large scale models, language models, thoughtfully curated with subject matter expertise to produce useful insights as opposed to just any insight, combined with things like RAG, which would add quantification into LLMs, and then married eventually with quantum, perhaps in the 5 to 10 year time frame, would be a very exciting space to be.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. You can all check Quantum off of your bingo card for the day. But thank you all so much for listening, and please give these guys a round of applause.
Effort. It's good.